Welcome to Chapter 15. We now enter the period of development known as late adulthood, those 60 plus years of age. And in this chapter, we will look at the physical and cognitive development of these older adults. The major topics that we will cover are longevity, the course of physical development in late adulthood, health, cognitive functioning in older adults, as well as mental health. And we will begin this video with looking at longevity. Um, in this section, we will cover life expectancy and lifespan. There are two other sections I'm not covering, but I encourage you to read in the text. In particular, the biological theories of aging are very interesting and talk about why we age and why we have a life expectancy and what makes us wear down as we get older. So some very interesting theories mentioned there. Let's begin with life expectancy and lifespan. The lifespan of a species refers to the maximum number of years that species can expect to live. For humans, this is 120 to 125 years. This is the kind of the time period of the oldest adults have been recorded. I believe the record might be something like 122 years, if my memory serves me correctly. So lifespan is a maximum, time period that you can expect to live. Life expectancy is the average number of years that you can expect to live depending on where you were born and when you were born. For those born in the US in 2017, life expectancy is 79 years of age. So those that were just born a few years ago can expect to live, once again, on average, up to 79 years of age. In 2030, we're expecting the life expectancy to be up to around 83 for women and 79 and a half for men. So it's still increasing. Conditions are still improving. Health and medical conditions are still improving, such that our life expectancy is still going up. It changes, life expectancy changes from one part of the world to another. In 2015, the country with the highest life expectancy was Monaco, and the life expectancy there was 90 years of age, so considerably higher than the 79 years currently in the US. On the low end of the scale, we had countries like Chad and Guinea-Bissau with a life expectancy of 50, and countries like Swaziland and Afghanistan with life expectancies of 51. So there are some countries that are considerably lower than the US, 50 to 51 years of age being the average age that people live to. Obviously, in those countries, factors such as their health conditions and their medical care, are greatly reduced compared to industrialized, richer countries like the US. Also, if a country experiences war, that obviously brings down the life expectancy as well. Beginning in the mid 30s, women start to outnumber men because of both social and biological factors. One example of the social factors that men tend to be heavier smokers than women, leading to a shorter life expectancy. There's also biological factors at work as well. We see that females outlive males in virtually all species. They are biologically programmed in a sense, or biologically adaptive to outlive males. A couple of the reasons are that women have more resistance to infections and degenerative diseases due to their estrogen production. So, as an example, estrogen helps protect women from arteriosclerosis, which is hardening of the arteries. So that's one factor, the estrogen. The second is that women have an additional X chromosome. Remember, we talked about this in an earlier unit. Females have two X chromosomes, males have an X and a Y chromosome, the Y chromosome being much shorter than the X chromosome. And so it's lacking certain genes that a woman with two X chromosomes would have. So having an additional X chromosome provides a woman with additional antibodies to fight off diseases. So there are a couple biological reasons why women outlive men, and we see that after the age of the mid-30s, um, we have more women in society at every age after that. If we go all the way up, for instance, to 85 plus years of age, it's basically made up of 70% females in our country here. So by the time we get to 85 and older, we have a population of 70% females to 30% males. So I mean, the gap really widens the older you get. Men die off faster, women live longer. In the next section, we will look at the aging brain, physical appearance and movement. I have it crossed out here, but I will cover it briefly, and sensory development. So the aging brain, we have a shrinking, slowing brain as we get older. It loses 5 to 10% of its weight between the ages of 20 and 90. One area that shrinks more than others with aging is the prefrontal cortex, and this leads to a decrease in working memory and other cognitive activities in older adults. Why does the brain volume decrease? Well, there's a number of factors that contribute to this. Shrinkage of neurons is one of the main ones. Also, there's a lower number of synapses, that is connections between neurons, reduced length and complexity of axons, and reduced tree-like branching in dendrites. Not as many branches on the dendrites. It's only the difference in the decrease in weight and volume is only to a minor extent attributable to neuron loss. So it's not that you're losing neurons; it's that they're either they're shrinking, the branches they're not branching as much, the axons aren't as long, there aren't as many connections. But it's not that you're really losing neurons, unless you have some kind of dementia, such as Alzheimer's. Then you would see a significant loss of neurons. The slowing of the function of the brain and the spinal cord begins in middle adulthood and accelerates in late adulthood. This affects physical coordination and intellectual performance, especially for timed tests. When we test older adults, if they have unlimited time, their intellectual performance of an older adult is not that much different to a middle-aged adult. I mean, but when you add a time factor, what we find is that it really is a slowing of the thought processes as their nervous system begins to slow. I mean, this just leads to a slowing of their intellectual performance. And certainly we see this if you talk to older adults, they just take longer to find certain words and to remember certain details of a story or memory. But it doesn't mean that the information is not there. It's just a slower process for them to retrieve the information. The adapting brain. Our brains show remarkable abilities to adapt as we get older. And so we see the brain will change in order to maintain certain functionality. One thing that we see is neurogenesis, the generation of new neurons takes place. For most of the history of psychology, we were of the opinion that you would never generate new neurons as an adult. Um, it was a long time before evidence appeared that shows that at least in two areas we do generate new neurons. One area is the hippocampus, which is involved in memory, and the other area is the olfactory bulb, which is involved in smell, the smell sensation. Uh, these new neurons, it turns out, only last for several weeks. So it's for one reason or another, and we don't completely understand it. In two areas of the brain, we have found that we generate temporary neurons that have a limited um, life expectancy. Um, okay, we also show dendritic growth in older adult years. A study in 1986 by Coleman, Coleman, showed that that dendrites increased and grew from the age of 40 to 70, ages of 40 to 70 in the study. So the dendrites continue to grow and get longer. I mentioned on the earlier slide they have less branches, but the actual length of the dendrites continues to increase. So this is kind of a compensatory factor. They don't have many branches, but they do get longer at least. Older brains rewired to compensate for losses. And there is a decrease in lateralization in older adult brains. We're more likely to use both hemispheres to process information, and this helps improve cognitive functioning. Once again, this is a compensatory function, kind of making up for a lack of speed. The brains are slowing down. So in order to make up for that, we start using both sides of the brain for certain tasks. Let me show you an example on this next slide here. Um, Here we see uh, this is based on a recall memory task for words. So trying to remember a list of words and recall them. In the top two pictures, we can see that young adults use the right side of the prefrontal cortex mainly to do this task. So you can see uh, the right side is the side that's kind of lit up. It's on the left side of the it's on the left side of the picture, but it's the right side of their brain that has activity. On the right side is the left hemisphere of their brain. You can see very little activity for the younger adults. However, for the older adults, you can see that they use both the left and the right sides of the brain to improve their functioning in this recall task. Both areas have significant portions of the prefrontal cortex lit up. Okay. Just to backtrack for one moment here, I got a little picture of a couple of nuns and also a picture of a brain at the bottom here, and this is because I wanted to mention the nun study that your book talks about, because it's such an extraordinary study by a wonderful group of women. This nun study involves 678 nuns, mainly in Minnesota. They have consented to annual assessments of their cognitive and physical functioning. So they get tested year after year, and then upon their deaths, they donate their brains for research. This is the largest group of brain donors in the world, and so they get to monitor their functioning and physical and cognitive functioning year after year during their late adult years, and then after they die, they study the brains to see how that links to what they observed in their testing over the years. Um, what they've been learning about through this study is the remarkable capacity of the brain to change and grow, even in older age. And in this particular group of nuns they're considered to be pretty high functioning because they engage cognitively demanding tasks. Um, you know, it's basically an intellectual, lifestyle that they're engaged in, and so it's been a very important study for learning about brains in older adults. Bless their hearts. Okay, physical appearance and movement. I'll do this quickly here. Most noticeable changes in older adulthood: wrinkles and age spots. We get shorter with aging due to bone loss in our vertebrae. Both this is true of both men and women. I talked about it in middle adulthood as well. Um, weight drops occur after the age of 60 due to muscle loss. Exercising can help reduce this. And older adults move more slowly than younger adults. Okay, let's go on. Sensory development. Here we'll look at vision. And some of the typical and expected areas to be affected in late adulthood include your visual acuity, which is the level of detail that you can see. Color vision declines with age, and this is due to the yellowing of the lens of the eye, and so it affects the ability to distinguish different colors. And your depth perception also declines in your late adulthood years. We could add to this list as well. Your light dark adaptation becomes slower, so adjusting to differences in lighting conditions. For example, walking out of a dark theater into bright sunlight. I mean, you would have to try to quickly adapt. It's slower the older we get to do that. One more thing is glare tolerance diminishes. This makes night driving harder. You can't tolerate glare, for instance, windshield glare as much when you're older. Diseases of the eye become more prominent in late adulthood. I've got 3 of them listed here. I think I can leave these for you to read on your own. I guess the only thing I would add is if glaucoma is something that can be treated with eye drops. But all these need to be dealt with as early as possible for optimal outcomes. If they're not treated, they can worsen over time. The picture that you see here is an image of what it would look like to have macular degeneration, which is kind of that you lose the center of your vision. Okay, let me go on. And so here's a little chart looking at some of the vision and hearing changes that are expected in late adulthood years. Just to summarize a couple of points here. Visually, your field diminishes in late adulthood, so events in your peripheral vision might not be detected. This obviously makes driving a little bit harder. You have to turn your head more as you start to lose your peripheral vision. For hearing, one thing that I think I mentioned in middle adulthood years is that you lose higher frequencies first. You tend to have more troubles hearing female versus male voices in late adulthood years because of this. And you can read the rest on your own. Some health problems, and I'm just going to read through these real quick here. The probability of having disease or illness increases with age. Obviously, the older we get, the more likely it is we will have some disease or illness. Chronic diseases with slow onset and long duration are more common in late adulthood compared to earlier time periods. So things like cancer or cardiovascular illness. As you can see, the causes of death in older adults, nearly 60% of the 65 to 74-year-old Age category, die of cancer or cardiovascular disease. Those are the top two factors leading to death. And you can see that covers over 60 or close to 60% of all deaths in that age category. As we get older, cardiovascular disease becomes the leading cause of death after the age of 75. Okay, ethnicity is linked with death rates in older adults. You read more about that in the book, and you can also read more about arthritis. I think most people have an understanding what it is, but it certainly becomes more common the older we get. Osteoporosis is extensive loss of bone tissue. It causes older adults to walk with a stoop. Women are far more vulnerable. Approximately 80% of cases of osteoporosis are females. To prevent osteoporosis, young and middle-aged adult women should eat foods rich in calcium, exercise regularly, and avoid smoking. Those are probably the three top recommendations. Eat foods rich in calcium, exercise regularly, and avoid smoking. Accidents are the 8th leading cause of death in older adults. And of the different types of accidents, falls are the main type of accidents leading to death for those 65 plus. And that concludes the section on physical development in late adulthood.